For the following presentation, quality report of the crop of in the cycle 22-23, we have Alexander. I'm sorry for my French. Grabois, from manager of strategic processes in the United States. In his role, he supports the programs of development of the market and offers the experience and commercial services to the office of the council, and furthermore to strengthen the relationships with the trades in the United States and the users in the rest of the world. Before arriving to the council, Alexander had 1 decade of experience as a commercial representative in ProChile, and has worked in the Council of Chile in New York and the Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Alexander has a master's degree in public administration and international relationships. In this question session, he will be joined by Lee Singleton. He is senior consultant of Centric Company, who developed this report and has been working since 2012 with financial analysis, agricultural aspects, and research in the market. He has a master's degree in business management from the Indiana University. Approved the 2 exams of the study plans of Charter for Analyst, and has the experience of his trades in Illinois. Is involved in all the phases of trade reports in the council according to Corn 2012 and 2013. Especially determines the assignation of the sample, orders the sampling and elevators, generating the results of the reports, and is producer of several sections and has editorial function for those. Alexander and their Lee virtually, so you are welcome.
Buenas tardes a todos y a todas.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you. Thank you, Ana Maria, for your very generous introduction, and thank you all for being here with us today. Today, I would like to present the results of the harvest quality report for the 22-23 cycle, corn harvest that is. This is the 12th year that we have produced this report, and thank you, Liz, and thank you to the Centric team for all their help. And what we would like to do with this report is basically do an evaluation of all the trends and all the factors that affect the quality of corn. Again, we produce 2 annual reports, one during the harvest, which is what we're presenting today, and we have another report, an export report that we produce in March. So it is very important that you guys pay close attention for any news in those reports. It is also important for us to produce this report because our objective is to produce information or to give information to you, our clients, information with regards to the quality of the corn and with regards to what we see with regards to the harvest. As we all know, there are many factors that play a very important factor with regards to grains imports and exports, storage, harvest, and other factors as well. We are going to evaluate 4 different factors, great factors, which includes a specific weight, broken corn, foreign material, total damage, and heat damage. Also, moisture, although it is not a factor that affects the grades, is a very important factor. So we're going to analyze this under the same umbrella, under the same space. Physical factors include stress cracks, 100 grains weight, grain volume, true density, whole grains, hard endosperm. And with regards to the chemical composition, we include important things such as protein, starch, and oils. And of course, we're going to speak about mycotoxins as well. The first 3, which are the most common, aflatoxins, DON or vomitoxin, and fumonisin. But of course, we're going to also mention ochratoxin A, T2, and cerealinone. With this, I would like to continue speaking about the different growing conditions and the impacts with regards to the harvest. As you can see on the slide, wet, moist conditions during April and May slowed down the planting, and the silking was accelerated when hotter days came further on in May during the silking. Pollination was also similar to the 5-year average, and it is important to know that Drought and heat were important during the grain filling process.
El cultivo fue sembrado más tarde
Again, planting was done later than what is normally done, and during the silking, they had hot and dry conditions, basically very good conditions. With regards to the other factors that were important with regards to climate, the delay with regards to the planting basically were because the cold, wet conditions and the growth was affected by the heat. Pollination was similar, or the silking stage was similar. Except for the eastern half of the Gulf ECA, grain developed in general average conditions, while heat and drought elsewhere enhanced protein and hard endosperm concentrations. Dry conditions at the end of the season led to rapid field drying and timely or efficiency with regards to the harvest of dry grains. And I would like to highlight other key aspects with regards to the 2022-2023 harvest. One is that 59% of the harvest was graded as good or excellent, although we had a smaller yield. By October 30th, the harvest had been collected up to 76%. This was above the figures of 2021 and above the 5-year average. Other factors that we need to highlight is that a specific weight was higher. In addition to the BCFM, or broken corn foreign material, were also higher in addition to stress cracks. Total damage, starch, oil, 100 grain weight, and whole grains were also lower. We had similar conditions with regards to moisture and real density. Now we're going to speak about the details. As you know, U.S. grains are graded in 5 different categories. U.S. corn, that is, grade 1, grade 2, 3, 4, and 5. But to have these grades, we have to comply with the conditions for all the conditions for the grading. In this study, we included 600 samples. 81.5% of those samples were met the conditions for grade 1. This is compared to 90% in 2021. And 95.3 of all the samples had or met the conditions to be graded as grade number 2, compared to 98% in 2021. The aggregate average quality of the 600 samples that were analyzed was better than all the requirements for grade 1 factor. When we speak about specific weight, 75.3 kilograms per hecto. And this was above the 5-year average, and 93.1 was graded as number 1. And as you can see, the specific weight was mean for the Gulf, and it was higher for the Gulf area, which is important for those of you that import from Mexico. Another important factor that we're all aware of is BCFM, broken corn foreign material. The aggregate average of BCFM was 79% and 92% met the conditions to be graded as grade number 1. This is above the 5-year average, and this was similar in the 3 different export collection areas. But we're going to speak now individually about BCFM, because we can see that most BCFM is basically broken corn, and indeed it was 0.7% as indicated in the study, a little bit higher than the 5-year average, but it was relatively the same in the 3 collection areas. Something that is also important is that BCFM is 90. It retains 95% of its nutritional value. So although it is broken, it remains, or it keeps its nutritional value, and its uses. With regards to foreign material, we have a little bit less concentration, 0.2%, which is the same as the 5-year average. 89.5 had less than 0.5% of foreign materials. When we speak about whole grains, 91% uh, were in these studies were whole grains, and this is not an important factor for grading. But when we speak about BCFM, yes, it is important to know the percentage of whole grains. There was a lesser percentage in the Gulf, and perhaps this is related to climate conditions because they had drier conditions in that area. When we speak about total damage and heat damage, the average was um, 2% lower, and heat damage was 0% this year. Moisture, although it is not a factor for grading, it's something that is quite important for our buyers, for our clients. As a matter of fact, this is included in many of the agreements that you sign, and in this case, we had a similar percentage compared to previous years, 16.3%. The highest moisture was at the Gulf area, but it was quite similar to, well, actually, it was way higher than the Southern Railway and the Pacific Northwest. Now we're going to speak about the chemical composition of the grains that we analyzed. Protein concentration is reduced if we do not have nitrogen on the ground, and also during the years of lower yields, the relationship between protein and starch is an inverse relationship. In other words, if we have more protein, we have less starch, and vice versa. In this case, the aggregate value of protein was higher than the 5-year average, 8.8%, and we had also less protein in the Gulf area. And what this means, what does this mean for starch then? Well, this means that there was a lower percentage. Starch had an average of 71%, 71.9% aggregate percentage, and the Gulf ECA usually has a higher percentage of starch, and we do know that the U.S. has a competitive advantage with regards to starch extraction and with regards to the percentages of starch in the grains that can be extracted. And again, it's an advantage compared to other sites, and this is something that we are analyzing at the U.S. Grains Council to see how we can maximize that potential. With regards to oil is actually lower than in previous years. The percentage is 3.9%, the aggregate percentage, and it is relatively the same in all the ECAs, export collection areas, that is. And of course, oil is an essential part for different industries, including the livestock industry. It is the main energy source. It facilitates the use of vitamins and so on. Oil is also an essential product that comes from dry millers and wet millers. In this report, we also measure additional physical factors, in other words, other quality attributes that do not really affect the grades. I would like to mention a very generic perspective with regards to stress cracks. Here we go. Again, stress cracks are very important when we look at drying and when we look at the different climate effects, as Juan mentioned during his presentation in detail. But again, this basically reinforces what he said. We have density, we have kernel weight, volume, and density, and this relates to the moisture levels that we have mentioned before. I would like to continue with this table that we have on the slide. This table presents a very generic perspective, and it gives you the most important figures with regards to what we analyze, of course. Let's continue speaking about stress cracks. Again, 600 samples. The average of those 600 samples had an average of 6.9% with regards to stress cracks. Standard deviation of 5.2%. And also to the right, we have the minimum and the maximums. So there was a shipment that actually had zero stress cracks, and we had another one that had 66%. That was the maximum. And when we speak about stress cracks, we had more stress cracks in the Gulf area, and we had an average that was above the 5-year average in all the ECAs. Dry conditions came after maturity. The late planting was also compensated, as mentioned before, due to the hotter conditions. And the 100 grain weight had an average of 33.9, and the Gulf had the highest average with regards to the other areas. In other words, this indicates that grains were larger than in the other ECAs, and in the Northwest Pacific Northwest ECA, the grains are usually smaller as well. And when we look at grain volume, Gulf had the highest figures, followed by the Southern Railway. And this implies that grain that goes to Mexico and Latin America is going to be a little bit bigger than the grain that is sent to Asia. Volume is affected by photosynthesis, by the name of grains that are silk, and by the genetics and the level of fertilization. And in general terms, softer corn is due to its real density. When we speak about hard endosperms, this is very, very important for milling. Those of you that work with wet mills prefer percentages greater than 90%. Well, excuse me, is the opposite. Again, it's the opposite. Again, dry millers prefer 90% horneous endosperm, while wet millers prefer this between 70% and 80%. So we're right in the middle of being preferred by wet and dry millers. Again, grains were actually softer at the ECA Gulf, and with regards to the Pacific Northwest and the Southern Railway, were 88 were the same. The percentage was again higher compared to the 5-year average of 81%. Now I'm going to speak about mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are, of course, a very important part of this analysis, and it is very important to begin with a disclaimer. We conduct this analysis during harvest time, and there are different factors that play a very important role before the grains reach their final destination. And again, we used 600 samples. It is very important for you to conduct the same analysis when you receive the grain, especially with regards to mycotoxins, because the grain suffer changes during the export. We would like to present and evaluate measurable values of the three mycotoxins, aflatoxin, DON, and fumonisin, and we would also like to present a perspective of ochratoxin, T2, and cerealinone. And we're going to see in detail the results of this analysis and how this topic advances, and we will see that in the March report. There are 4 different types of aflatoxins that we find naturally in food: B1, B2, G1, and G2, and these 4 are commonly known as aflatoxins. And again, this is important. It is important to say that the samples that did not have any aflatoxins were lower than in the prior 2 years. 98.3%, in other words, were below the level of action of the FDA, which is 20 parts per billion. Conditions of the growing season were proper for the development of aflatoxin in some areas. And as we can see in this graph, the only year during which we had a higher samples was 2012, when we had a drought that year. So again, this is 2012, again this drought year, and again we can see the aflatoxin level was way high that year. It was the only year when we had higher levels. And when we speak about vomit toxin on Don, the percentage of samples below 1.5 ppm was lower than in 2021 and 2020. Only one sample was above the FDA recommendation levels, which is 5 ppms. And when we speak about fumonisin, the percentage was below 5 ppms. It was a bit higher than in 2021 and a bit higher than in 2020 as well. And in this analysis, there were no samples indicating ochratoxin, and this is the third year in a row that we analyzed for that mycotoxin. We had the same situation for T2, and this indicates that, and again, this indicates that we had an analysis that did not find any T2, and I understand that climate or weather played a very important role with regards to these results. Certainly known, again, this was part of this analysis, and 100% of the 600 samples that we analyzed did not present this mycotoxin or aflatoxin. And again, it is important when we speak about conclusions, it is important to understand that this is based on the analysis that we conducted with Centrix. But again, it is very important for you to do your own analysis once you receive your products in your destination. When we speak about conclusions, and I would like to close by mentioning two very important topics, we saw that the samples during this season were quite good. 95.3 of all the samples had a grade 2 or better than that, and this is compared to 98% in 2021 and 94.5% in 2020. Specific weight, BCFM, protein, and stress cracks were also higher than the 5-year average, while total damage and grain volume were actually lower. This reflects the conditions of the planting season and the harvest. In some areas, the growing season was quite proper for the development of aflatoxins. With this, thank you very much for your time, and we are available to answer any questions that you might have. So we are open for questions. Alexander, thank you very much for your presentation. Again, right now this is the space for questions. Please raise your hand and wait for a microphone to ask your question. And we're also going to give some time for our virtual participants to ask questions. So Carlos and Alejandro, you guys have the microphones. Please bring the microphones to whoever raises their hand. We have two people raising their hands, so one on each side, please. Thank you. Tremendous amount of information. My question is, these are harvest analysis. Is there any type of monitoring after the storage period, after the grains come out of storage? Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, thank you for the question. It is a very relevant question. We have a report that comes out in March that is the export report right before the grain is put on the ship. And Lee, if you are connected, do you have any replies for this question? Do you have any additional replies? Again, Lee, if we can, Lee, can you hear us? We believe Lee has connected. Lee is connected.
Turn your camera on.
It won't let me share.
Okay.
You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, okay. We're gonna work on that. Sorry about that. Do you have a comment on the question here about? Yep. Okay. Go ahead.
I think the biggest thing is that the samples are collected as or from Fegis as the vessels or rail cars are being loaded for export. So it's the samples are taken during Fetus's normal grading and sampling procedures.
What Anna is saying, Lee, is that we're having some technical issues with regards to interpretation.
Spanish. So
What Anna is
I'm going to open up for another.
what Anna is asking the logistics people is if they can somehow have my voice being projected in the room without translation devices. And again, Anna is saying this to you, Lee. There's a question from Alejandro. Alejandro says, I am quite surprised that the results were zero heat damage when moisture levels were 16.3%. My question is what happens after the grains reach the elevator and so on. I'm sure there was some heat damage. What happened in that case? I'm going to ask Lee to answer that question. Again, Lee was the one responsible for the analysis, so perhaps he can give us additional details as to what was the case. Lee, is the question clear to you?
I think most of the samples, I'm sure some of them were dried on farm prior to delivery to the elevator. So these samples were collected at the first point of sale, but notwithstanding that, most of these samples are coming directly from the field. So they wouldn't have had the opportunity to be artificially dried. So that's where we get the lack of heat damage. And all of these samples were tested by a FEGIS licensed lab, the same labs that test the samples prior to export for the grade factors. So that's the biggest reason why we didn't see heat damage, that most of these samples are coming directly from the field.
Yo voy a resumir,
Which won't be the case during the export report.
Yo voy a resumir la respuesta.
Anna says she's going to summarize your answer, Lee. What Anna is rephrasing, Lee, is that again, for those of you that are not listening to translation through the devices, again, please keep in mind that the samples are taken at harvest point. And again, what Lee just said is that most of the samples being analyzed come directly from the field and have not been necessarily dried. So this is normal. And based on the prior 11 reports, I can definitely say that we do see that this report at harvest point, there are no samples with heat damage. And when we look or when we analyze for the export reports, we have some heat damage. So again, at harvest point, this is not unusual. Export point, yes, we do see more heat damage. If any of my colleagues would like to expand this information, perhaps Alejandro. Alejandro says, yes, as Anna and Lee indicated in the prior 11 reports, the trend has been the same. It's not something unusual, it's not a problem. Again, in recent years, this situation has evolved, and also drying is not as aggressive as it used to be. Anna continues again, the prior question. Can you guys repeat the prior question, please? The question is if again, Anna is asking if we have the technical capacity for my voice translating to be heard in the room. So Anna is asking the person that asked the original question to ask, not the first question, the second question that you already answered, Lee. They're asking that person to repeat the question. The first question you just replied, that was with regards to heat damage. So we're going to the other question that was answered, and apparently that question has already been answered as well. Right. The response to that first question is yes. We have a report that has two different sections. The first section is samples at harvest points, and the second part of this report is samples taken at elevator. Again, once the corn has reached the elevators to be exported, that's when we take the second sample. And again, my apologies for these technical difficulties. I wasn't sure. Do we have another question apparently? Yes, we do have another question. Thank you, Alexander, for your presentation. The question is the following. As an individual user, I would like to see mycotoxin levels being analyzed from a more critical perspective with regards to nutrition. 5 ppm of DON is quite high, and also the T2 figures were quite high. Maybe in future analysis you could look at using or at providing more details, because these figures might generate challenges for livestock production. And again, this is just a suggestion and not request from me. He replies, we're going to consider that, is what Christian just replied. Lee, would you like to comment on that suggestion that was just made with regards to mycotoxins? Again, trying to have lower mycotoxin levels. You, Lee, with regards to the methodology, would you like to expand that answer, or would you like to tell us why those levels were selected?
The purpose of how mycotoxins are reported was mainly to report on the instances of when they were detected, more so than calculating an average level. Yeah, we do break it out into these have instances versus these have, the FDA advisory level, FDA action level. So the samples or the proportion of samples that exceed those values are reported, but I don't think we have enough samples to, and it really was an objective of ours to calculate an average mycotoxin concentration. Just because A, we don't have enough samples, and B, there's so much volatility within mycotoxin measurement and concentration in individual loads and how you sample it, that it becomes pretty hazardous to average mycotoxin concentration across samples. So reporting it with the frequency distribution as we did was something that the council and ourselves kind of jointly agreed would be the best practice. But we can talk about how to better present that in the future to provide more information.
Thank you, Lee. Gracias, Lee. Para quienes no tenían...
Anna is rephrasing your question. Rephrasing your answer, Lee. What Anna is replying right now is that the idea of the report is to present the incidence more than the actual level. So she's saying that you, Lee, said that we do not have sufficient samples, and also that volatility with regards to the measurement of those samples would imply an additional risk if we were to give an average number. But yes, Andres, your suggestion is more than welcome, and we're going to analyze what we can do. Our DC team loves to hear these suggestions, and we're going to consider your suggestion. And Lee gave us an explanation as to why it is done the way it is done. A comment from Jorge Ordóñez says, good day everyone. I would suggest expanding the information presented. Again, we have had the lowest starch levels, and also with regards to additional information to reduce BCFM. I would also like to see the AW water activity too, because the 2022 harvest was close to the 0.70 limit, which is ideal. And with this, greetings. And again, that's not a question, that was just a comment. We have different things to consider based on that suggestion. Jorge, thank you for your comment. We're going to go over that. And Christian replies, yes, this is something that we will go over, as well as Anna just replied. Do we have any other questions from you in the auditorium? Anybody in the auditorium? Anybody in the room with any additional questions? No questions? So with this, thank you. Thank you very much, Lee. Our apologies for not being able to have you translated directly into the room without the translation devices, but they all understood your answer with my help as well. Thank you, Lee.